Yeah, we're going to start Lamed Zayin on the base, on the bottom. Amar Ravasi, Isa Shalmaisa Sheni, L'divra Meir P'tur Menachala, L'divra Cham Chayeves B'chala. Okay, we're talking about making matzah out of different things of sanctity or different items. Here we have matzah that's being made out of Meiser Sheni. So before we said a machlekes between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva regarding if you can use Meiser Sheni. For Meiser Sheni is the tie that you bring to Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yossi Aglili had an issue with aninas, that lechem oini. You have to be able to eat the meiser with in a state of aninas, and Meiser Sheni can't be eaten in a state of aninas. Rabbi Akiva said that wasn't an issue. Now we have Ravasi saying that it's actually machlekes Reb Meir and the Chachamim. According to Reb Meir, Meiser Sheni doesn't really belong to you. It's considered mammon gavaya. You bring it to Yerushalayim, you eat it there, but you're actually eating the food that belongs to the Eibishter, and he feeds it to you. You eat it off his table, but it's not really yours. You get to eat it, but it's not really yours. Chum say no. It is yours. So the first statement that Ravasi says is that l'divra meir p'turim min achala. Before we get to the matzah, first he says p'turim min achala. That because it's not yours, and when it says that you take challah, so you only have to take challah off your dough. And it says arisei seichem, off your own dough. This is not your dough. But according to the Chacham, it is your dough. So you are chayev in challah. Matzah shel meiser sheni. Now we go to the second case. This is really more relevant to us. Matzah shel meiser sheni. If you try to make it on top of lamed ches, if you make matzah out of meiser sheni, l'divra meir ein adam yidei chavasa b'pesach, l'divra cham yetze b'yidei chavasa b'pesach. Same story. According to Reb Meir, it's not really yours. And for whatever reason, the Gemara is going to need to explain this. But you're not yoytze matzah if it's not yours. Why is it not yours? Because it's meiser sheni. It belongs to the Eibishter. And according to the Chacham, yoytze b'yidei chavas pesach, it is yours. Now this is would be the more common example of this issue is esrig shel meiser sheni. If you brought a esrig, now I think meiser. Not sure what grains go under meiser sheni or what produce goes under meiser sheni. But maybe you had to purchase this with money. Okay. You need to mute or unmute, whatever. I'm not able to. So esrik shel meiser sheni l'divra meir inad miyitz b'yidei chavasa b'yamtiv. You're not yotze on yamtiv. It's not yours. And we know that an esrik needs to be olakachtam lachem. Has to be yours. And l'divra chachamim adam yotze b'yidei chavasa b'yamtiv. According to the chacham, it is yours. So that's acceptable. Maskef lo Rav Papa. Rav Papa asks to him. This is Ravasi. It's a gap in generation. I'm not sure how that works. Rav Papa asks. Bishlam Isa, when it comes to the dough, we're talking about challah. So, tiksiv arisei seichem, mishalachem. It needs to be your dough. That's what's chayiv in challah. Esrig nami tiksiv lakachtam lachem. By the esrig also, it says it has to be yours. Lachem, yours. Mishalachem, it should be yours. Elamatz miksiv matzaschem. Is there such a pasuk? You're making up a halacha. Doesn't say matzaschem that it needs to be yours. No, we learned from Gzeira Shava. In one place it says lechem by matzah. It says lechem by challah. Just like by challah, it needs to be yours. So to by matzah, it needs to be yours. It goes like this. Over here it says the poor man's bread. And over there it says that we're going to eat from the bread of the land. You have to take challah. It means separate the piece of dough. 1/24 or 1/48 of it and give it to the kayan malahalan mishalachem. Just like over there, the dough needs to be yours. Afkan mishalachem needs to be yours. If it's not your dough, you're not chayiv. Lema Messiah. Let's bring a support for this to Ravasi. See, the original machlekes between Reb Meir and the Chachamim is regarding, does Ma'aser Sheni belong to the person or does it belong to Gavaya? One of the ramifications of that is what Ravasi says, that according to Reb Meir it's pater from Chala, and according to Chacham it's Chayaves because it belongs to you. See, we have a brisa that says the same thing. The Gemara asks the question, Lema Messiah? Hainu hach? What are you saying? Let's bring a support. It's exactly the same thing. It says Hachi Kamar. He's saying, no, we're going to say more than this, more than what it's saying. Hachi Kamar. Lema mida pligi beisa bahanach nami pligi. Oidilma shani hasim diksev risa sechem trezimni. It says we could bring a support because Ravasi said more halachas than just the din of challah. He said that this machlekes would be relevant to other things as well. So, lim masayale, that if he says it by challah, it probably applies to the other things as well. Or maybe it doesn't apply. By challah, it says Arisa Sechem twice. And so therefore, that's a lima that you can't use Ma'aser Sheni as well. You can't use Ma'aser Sheni. I'm sorry that you're, if it's Ma'aser Sheni, you're exempt from taking challah. But other things, it doesn't say that. Which means by esrog, maybe it only says lachem once. Maybe by esrog you're actually allowed to use an esrog of Ma'aser Sheni because it's sort of in the middle. Is it yours or is it not yours? So in other words, when it says lachem by the esrog, it's coming to tell me that I can't use a stolen one or a borrowed one. But Ma'aser Sheni is mam and gavaya is not neither stolen or borrowed. It's not 100% yours. So maybe by an esrog it would work, and that's the Gemara's question over here. As Lema Messiah, let us say that this is a support, but it's not 100% a support. Reb Shimon ben Lakish. Reb Shimon ben Lakish has a question. Very interesting, complex question. Can a person take Ma'aser Sheni that he has in Yerushalayim, separate challah, according to the opinions that you separate challah from Ma'aser Sheni? With that challah, that's Ma'aser Sheni. There's two sanctifications on this dough. You then make matzah. Is it going to work? There's no question according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Remember, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says you have to be able to eat it ba'aninas, and Ma'aser Sheni can't be eaten ba'aninas, so you're not yetzer matzah. You have to be able to eat it in a state of mourning. Ma'aser Sheni can't be eaten in a state of mourning. It's no good. You don't fulfill the obligation. If it wouldn't have been challah, you wouldn't be allowed to use it for matzah. You have a question if you can use the challah of Ma'aser Sheni, you're only making it worse. The question is according to Rabbi Akiva. Why according to Rabbi Akiva are you yaitze with Ma'aser Sheni? Well, first of all, aninas wasn't an issue, but we did have another issue, and that was, can you eat it anywhere in the land of Israel? We said that once produce goes to Yerushalayim and goes within the walls, it can never leave. So you can't eat it anywhere in the land. However, we said according to Rabbi Akiva, he could follow the opinion of Rav Elazar that holds that if Ma'aser Sheni becomes tameh, you can redeem it even in Yerushalayim, and you could take it, and then you could take it out of Yerushalayim. So it really is b'chol meshvei seichem. It really is everywhere. So even though that's not what you're doing, but technically you could do that. So here's our question. You could have been yaitze with Ma'aser Sheni that's chulin as opposed to challah. The rest of the dough, not the pinch that was taken off, or not the 124th or 148th. Because if it would have been kam tameh, you would have been able to take it anywhere. you would have redeemed it and taken it out of Yerushalayim. You could eat it anywhere. Abal challah dimitame, Leslie had to be meishavas, but challah, if it becomes tamei, there's an issue. Leslie had to be meishavas. You can't redeem it because challah, if it becomes tamei, you have to burn it. Well, l'sreifa asla, leinafik. No, it's not becoming tamei here. We're just saying that if it would become tamei, theoretically you would have been able to eat it anywhere. That's not the case here. So Aydilma, or maybe we can look at this differently. We can say hayil ve'ilu leikara le'ashem v'tamei islay had to be mishavas v'nafik be'ashtanami nafik. Theoretically, once you're dealing with theoretically, you could redeem it if it would have become tamei. So let's take it a step further. We can say theoretically, you didn't have to turn this dough to challah. Maybe we could say hayil, that this piece of dough that I'm making now matzah never needed to become challah. So the question is, do we say this concept of hayil that I didn't have to call this dough challah? So we're looking at it as it had potential to not be challah.
Isn't that the case with all dough? You could take it, you could fry it. We decided that you make it certain ways, it's not bread. That's what it said early yesterday.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Notice I could have prepared it in a way. No, that's different. Here we're trying to make it acceptable for matzah. So the problem is that it's Ma'aser Sheni. Well, Ma'aser Sheni isn't really a problem because you can take it out of Yerushalayim if it becomes tamei, and so then it would be acceptable. But the problem is with this that it's challah, and challah, if it becomes tamei, you can't do anything with it. You have to burn it. So we said, well, it still had potential right now. In other words, I could view it that this dough never really needed to become challah. I could have taken a different piece of dough as challah. And so therefore, potentially, this dough is still acceptable to be matzah. You're asking, but I could also make it into things that aren't acceptable for matzah. Yeah, we're looking at it the other way. We're looking at it that is it potential to be chayav, to be acceptable as matzah? Oil. We're trying to view it like regular Ma'aser Sheni. That's what we're trying to do. Someone's coming out of the car. I think it's a security. Fine. Okay. We'll get a little clarification when we go further. The Gemara takes it a step further. Ikad Amri, there are those that say, I'm sorry, I'm up to Idilma. Idilma Hayil, the Ilo Laikar Lashem Vitimui, Islihatim Meshavas, that's not enough. Okay, yeah, that's what we said. We had the two options here. Either we say that this is a problem because it's challah and it has to be burnt. If it would become tamei, it's not tamei. We're talking about if it would become tamei, then it would have to be burnt. Or do we say that because it never really needed to become challah, so this is still acceptable as matzah? The concept of hayil. Hayil means since. Ikadamri, there are those that say havade latibayilach. This is definitely not an issue. The Vade Amrin and Hayil will definitely say if it's Ma'aser Sheni that's challah that became tamei, or if it didn't become tamei, it would be acceptable. Why are we talking about tumah over here? We're saying tumah because tumah would allow me to redeem it. So we're saying, but in this case, if it becomes tamei, then you're stuck because it's challah. So he said this for sure would be acceptable. We'd say, well, it never really needed to become challah. Kiti bailach, where's our question? Challah halakuach because of ma'aser sheni. We throw in another factor which makes things much worse. There's ma'aser sheni that was brought to Yerushalayim, and there's ma'aser sheni that was bought with. There's ma'aser sheni money that buys produce, and that's a step worse. That has new restrictions that it can't be redeemed. It was already redeemed once, and now you repurchased. So it goes like this. According to it's a machlekes, Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda. According to the Rabbanan, there's no question. If you can redeem it, according to the Rabbanan, you can redeem it again. So he says, okay, back to the same case. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Dam Yikaver, he just says you have to bury it at this point if it becomes tummy. There's no redemption to something that was already bought with redeemed ma'aser sheni, with the money of redeemed ma'aser sheni. So according to him, we have a problem. The Tanan, halakuach because of ma'aser sheni shenitma. Let's say ma'aser sheni becomes tummy. I'm sorry. Let's say you had money from ma'aser sheni that you bought produce in Yerushalayim, and then that produce becomes tummy. So the first opinion is yipada, you redeem it. Rabbi Yehuda you cover. Rabbi Yehuda says that you have to bury it. There's no redemption. So now the question is, you want to use lakuach because of ma'aser sheni. That for matzah. How could you get it out of Yerushalayim? Well, if it would become tamei, theoretically you could redeem it and then take it out of Yerushalayim. Well, it's not tamei right now, but if it would become tamei, you would have an issue of challah. You wouldn't be able to redeem it, and then you have a secondary issue. You have another issue is that this is not real ma'aser sheni. It's not original ma'aser sheni. This is ma'aser sheni that was redeemed once and it's already there. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can never redeem it again. So it goes like this. Do we say hayal since that if this would not have been bought with ma'aser sheni, the hayal v'leikarash ala shem v'itame, and also since technically, theoretically, this didn't have to be the challah. Yesh lehetim ma'shavas v'nafik bey. In other words, I could say, once I'm saying theoretically or potentially, this didn't have to be lakuach. The ma'aser sheni, this could have been the original, and this also could have been not the challah. Yesh lehetim ma'shavas v'nafik bey. Then I would be allowed to take it out. Hashtanami nafik bey. So I should be yaitza with this as matzah. Or maybe will allow you to say hayal once. Maybe this didn't have to be challah. But now to say that this didn't have to be the original, the secondary purchase of ma'aser sheni, now you're taking it too far. We only say one hayal. We don't say two hayals. That's the question of Rish Lakish, according to the second opinion. Right. Okay. Excuse me. Amar Rava. Rava says, "Mistabra shem ma'aser chadu." If you could be yaitza matzah with ma'aser sheni, then you're always yaitza with ma'aser sheni. You're trying to throw in other factors here to make it worse. It says if ma'aser sheni is acceptable, then ma'aser sheni is acceptable for matzah. Saying like this, I can use, a kohen is allowed to use his challah for matzah, right? That we said. So, ma'aser sheni you're allowed to use, and challah you're allowed to use. So I know you have a complication here, but we're not going to make it worse just because of that. We're going to say that if ma'aser sheni was acceptable and challah on its own was acceptable, that's going to be, we're going to leave it as acceptable. Okay, chalas taider kiki nazar chulu. going back to the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, we said that if you made the bread of the taida, or the loaves of the taida and the wafers of the nazir, it depends if you made them for yourself or if you made them to sell. If you made them for yourself, you can't use them. And if you made them to sell, then you can use them for matzah. Okay. Now says, Nani Mili, where do you know this from? Amar Rab says, the pasuk says,
to hold on to my commitment to find a way through this.
Smart the matzah is you should guard the matzahs. Matzah, Mr. Meretz, l'shem matzah, it needs to be guarded just for matzah. Yatzazu shem Mr. Meretz, l'shem matzah, l'shem zebach. These loaves you have to guard, not just because it's matzah, but you have to guard it because it's a korban. So this is not acceptable for to be matzah. And the expression shmura matzah is because matzah needs to be protected from becoming haram. It needs to be watched. So what needs to be protected from? It needs to be protected as matzah. This has another factor, which is saying that therefore you can't use it as matzah.
Are you kidding?
Let's see. Okay. Yeah, for some reason I can't adjust it.
Can you ask everyone to mute themselves? Because the few people that are muted don't see the chat.
Be able to mute yourself. We're holding on Lamed Chesamid Beis, 2 lines down. Rabbi Yosef Amar, Rabbi Yosef says another pshat. Rabbi told us what's the reason why you can't use your own loaves that belong to a sacrifice. You can't use it for matzah, because the matzah needed to be guarded as matzah, and here you need to guard it for another purpose, which is because it's a sacrifice. Rabbi Yosef says a different reason. Amar Kra Shivas Yom Matzahs Techelu. 7 days you eat matzahs. Matzah nachelas Shivas Yamim. The matzah needs to be able to be eaten for 7 days. You're dealing with sacrifices that have a time limit, and the time limit is a day, or a day and a night. The korban taida, the loaves of the korban taida need to be finished by the morning. That's not. That's an increased time limit on matzah. And matzah, it says that it needs to be able to be eaten for 7 days. Our matzah is supposed to be able to be eaten for the rest of the year or longer, whatever they. But from the pasuk, it says that you should be able to be eaten for 7 days. 7 days you eat matzahs. These matzahs have a time limit of a day. Tanika v'sei de Rabba, Tanika v'sei de Rabbi Yosef. We have a brisa that supports Rabba, and we have a brisa that supports Rabbi Yosef. Tanika v'sei de Rabba, the brisa that supports Rabba is Yachal Yatsa Yidei Chayvasa B'chalas Teider Kikin Nazar Talmud Meshmart Mesa Matzahs. Maybe I could have thought that you can eat matzah. Be yotzei mitzvah matzah using the loaves that are part of these sacrifices, a Thanksgiving offering or a Nazir's offering. It says Shmarta Mesa Matzahs. No, you guard the matzah Mishtameres L'Shem Matzah. Yatzu Shena Mishtameres L'Shem Matzah L'Shem Zebach. These are not watched because of matzah. Well, they're not only because of matzah. They're watched also because this is a sacrifice. Tanika v'sei Rabbi Yosef. In Rabbi Yosef, there's a brisa that supports Rabbi Yosef about the time limit. Yachol yatzad midei chavasa b'chalis teider kikin nazir. Maybe you could have used these sacrifices, the loaves of these that belongs to these sacrifices, for your matzah on the night of Pesach. 7 days eat matzah. Matzah nechelas l'shiva. Matzah that could be eaten for 7 days. These are only eaten for 1 day and 1 night. The Gemara has a question. Remember, we said Lechem was one opinion, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that says that it needs to be able to be eaten ba'aninas. Sacrifices are not able to be eaten ba'aninas if a person is in a state of mourning. That means that this matzah would not be acceptable because it has another restriction on it. This needs to be eaten in joy, not in a state of mourning. The Gemara says, well, that was a machlekes. That was a machlekes Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. So our brises, Savalak Rabbi Akiva, the Einik Siv, says, maybe Ani Ksiv. I'm not sure what the vowels should be. It was like Rabbi Kiva that says it was Lechem Ani. That Lechem Ani. That means that it should that you couldn't add in wine or honey or oil. The Tepakle Dable Matzah Shiro. Now the Gemara is a good question. Gemara says, 1 second. Those loaves had oil in them. Oil in the dough would make it a rich man's bread. That would be a problem. Okay, what's happening here is that for the Korban Toida, you would take a chatzi lug, half a lug. Now, half of the chatzi lug went to, that means a quarter, went to 10 chales. And 10 rakikin. And the other half, those are different types of wafers. The other half went to the one that was in the deep frying pan. So what the Gemara is saying here is that when you use 1 revius for 20 loaves of bread, that's not enough oil to be considered ashira. It's too little oil. It's a revius, it's divided so thin, a little bit of oil isn't going to ruin it and make it into matzah shira. The Gemara says, but 1 second, there's a limitation on where you're allowed to eat. You're only allowed to eat it in Yerushalayim. Amar Rish Lakish says, well, there's a whole discussion about during the time when you were allowed to have a bama, you're allowed to have a private altar. So official sacrifices needed to be brought in the official mizbeach. But private sacrifices were allowed to be a shlamim or a naila, that was allowed to be brought on private altars. The question is, what about sacrifices that are not 100% official? They didn't have a time like Korban Pesach or something, but they were an obligation, but they didn't have any time on it when you had to bring it. What about those sacrifices? So Rish Lakish says, obviously the sacrifices like a Korban Toida and a Nazir, but those are obligations, but those could have been brought on the private altars of Noiva Givon. Bol and Noiva Givon, when they came to Noiv and to Givon, those cities, they didn't have an official altar. You could have used private altars during that period. If that's the case, then theoretically, the breads of a Taida be eaten all over Israel, not just in Yerushalayim. Potentially, if there's during those times that this was allowed, so therefore you don't have the limitation of b'chol ma'ishvei which would exclude other things. Tanya was taught in a brisa. Amar Rabbi Loi, Shalti es Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Loi says, I asked Rabbi Eliezer. I'm sorry. Can you use the breads of a taida, the wafers of the nazir for matzah? Amar li lo shamati. Rabbi Eliezer says, I never heard. This is Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkins. Basi b'shalti fnei Rabbi Yeshua. So I came to Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya. Amar li, he said to me, Harem achalas teidu kiki nazir shasan la'atzmei nedam yetzbem limkem b'shat yetzbem. So it depends. If you made them for yourself, then you're not Yaitza. But if you made them to sell, then you are Yaitza. I came back to Rabbi Eliezer and I told him what Rabbi Shua said. Amali Bris. He says that like this bris is an expression probably of like I promise or that's exactly the tradition that was said to Moshe. Ikadamri, some say that he said it differently. Bris, is that what was said? There's no reason. The time of my, what's the reason for that? Rabba says, anything that's taken to the marketplace, a person rethinks. And he says, Amar, if I'm able to sell it, then good, I'm going to sell it. But if I can't sell it, then I'm going to eat it myself. So that's the explanation. That's why, even though this was made for a sacrifice, but he made it to sell. So if he made it to sell, then he has an expectation that if it doesn't sell, he'll be able to use it himself for the matzah. This would fit with Rabba's earlier opinion that what was the issue with this is matzah mishtameres l'shem matzah, but this is mishtameres l'shem zevach. This is being guarded because it's a sacrifice. Well, not 100%, because he's still guarding it for a matzah because he has in his mind that maybe it's not going to sell and I'm just going to use it for my own matzahs. Okay, let's leave this over here. I rushed through it.
Thank you so very much. Yeshua Koyach. Thank you.
Okay.
Enough, Rabbi. Warm up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for trying.
Are you going to be back tomorrow? Officially?
Yeah, this is Hashem. I'm coming back. I'm coming shortly. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, have a great day.
Tishkele mitzvot, Yom Tov.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.